Alright. Gonna just do a little recording here to first make up for my people in 119 for week 3. This is going to be elements of visual style. The people in class most likely heard some of the stuff I'm about to talk about. However, you did not hear part 2, which would have been given to you today. I'd also like to use this video as a means toward gearing up for my async class. So please, async class, watch this whole thing. If you are in person, chances are I probably got around to at least half of this information, or at least a third, right? We stopped at texture last time, so keep that in mind. Why don't we go ahead and just get started right into it here. So obviously, as you all know, I have done an Adobe Animate Part 1 tutorial. This is going to help you with your GIF and allow you to destroy the propaganda GIF challenge, okay? So get into that, go wild, have fun with it, most of all, because it is fun to make parodies on propaganda, as we all know. At least for me, I don't know. I don't do it often, but when I do, it's a great time. It's a fantastic time. Anyways, yeah. This is kind of a makeup video for my, for all of my classes, just because of those family matters I had to take care of. But chances are I will be utilizing this lecture again later, and as such, I probably don't have family matters at that time in the future that are disturbing me. But who knows? You just don't know. Anyways, this is just a lecture on week 3 elements of visual style. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's hop into it. So, I'm not going to play the videos, right? So be aware of that. I want you to peruse the slides yourselves, play the videos, the video examples, I should say, of good use of visual style elements. Many games such as Grease and I believe I have some other ones in there as well that are good. Inked is a good one. Line, color, texture, shape, form, proportion. These are elements of visual style. Everyone, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, whoever you are, whatever you are, if you are a ghost or a creature, or you have whatever you want to be, just come and get it. Line, color, texture, shape, form, proportion, whatever you want to be. Let's go. Line, used in drawing to define a transition. Yep, that is that. Just kidding. Contour lines define the outline or silhouette of a shape. Obviously. Decorative lines, sometimes hatching, not all the time. These are used to define a little bit more. We can see here that we have thinner lines in the back, right, per the decorative lines, and then thicker lines in the front. Well, what does that do? That actually gives rise to depth, so that's something to consider. Even a contour line can actually give rise to depth if it's used in such a way. So perhaps the lines, in front could be thicker, right? Or if we want to, sort of create depth with particular, lines, we can do that. We can make it thicker to create, maybe it looks like it's closer, right? Thinner being more in the distance. Things like that. Decorative is obviously extremely useful, mainly because, and I would argue that decorative perhaps is the wrong word for it, because it isn't always decorative, it's more utilitarian, right? So we can argue about that another time, but we use line to define and create depth. So this is that trailer called Inked that I had talked about just now. This game has a sort of liberal use of decorative lines. It could give a dated or antique feel to an image, right? These decorative lines. Many games will use this, especially mobile games, because it's fairly lightweight for the most part as far as optimization for computing. But notice, even in this photograph, you have these objects that, a lot of objects are very light in line, right? Such as this pier here. And then you have very light sort of line here, although decorative. Additionally, there are, I mean, I guess I'm playing a video now, which is fine. But notice what happens. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but notice what happens with some elements like, right... Let's see... There. So these elements here that have these really thick lines, it's drawing the player towards it, right? So this is actually used as a tool for user experience, which is quite nice and a very useful sort of way to use line. You know, the creators said, well, why don't we just have it so that, you know, the things that the players are drawn toward are just bolder. You know, perhaps this is somewhere you have to go, right? You have to get on this platform. So they kept a kind of medium thick line here. Very thick line there. You have to do something with that box, right? It's going to help you get to that platform, perhaps. In many ways, there's kind of like a hierarchical order to this, too, if you think about it, which is actually kind of fascinating. So this is the thing you use, the thickest of line, right? This is where you put said thing that you are using to create movement and get you to where you have to be, which is this medium line. And then in the back, we have very light lines. At the moment, this area isn't being used, right? So it's hierarchical. It's sort of a hegemony of line, which is fascinating to kind of think about from a UX perspective, right? At least I think it is. So think about these things for your game. Machinarium, very, very nice. Basically, you have the light colors and lines into the back there, and the thicker, more vibrant color in the front, but still desaturated, of course, just to fit the aesthetic. But they're using line to create space. The Walking Dead line is also used as a means toward creating a very particular style, right? In this case, we have a graphic style that wants to emulate comic books, in particular Kirkman's comic book, The Walking Dead. This is Telltale's, based on The Walking Dead, a sort of mod of Walking Dead, if you will, through the eyes of the child character here. And I think that was a good decision on their part, to use the child as the protagonist. But note the contour lines, a lot of contours to kind of create that illustrative feel, the comic book graphic style, over the top of some 3D objects and characters. An early version of this was Champions Online. They really tried. I think they were very unsuccessful, but it still looked very digital and kind of interesting. I would love to bring this aesthetic back. I think it's kind of on the rise in some sense. But yeah, it was a sort of one of the first attempts. I wouldn't say the first attempt. I think there was people who had tried before Champions Online and maybe failed or just gave up, right? But it's kind of procedural in nature, which can be taxing at times. The successful version of all this, Borderlands 2, everybody. 3D artists found actually drawing lines out of the textures worked better. So instead of just like making it procedural so that the lines kind of follow the form and the shadows and all that, just draw the darn things on the character. It's fine. As long as you don't do too much preliminary shading, right? See how they did the hatch marks very light here? They didn't go all out, and they kept it more contour than anything else. And they didn't do too many deep, thick lines within the object, within the character. And that prevented it from looking too... sort of differentiated, I should say, it prevented it from not interacting with light properly, right? So it kind of like said, okay, where are the darkest parts that light is definitely not going to reach? Let's put those dark lines in there. That's what happened. So smart on their part. They did well with that. They kept it simple, and then they just went ham and just repeated the process. So I keep saying these words: contour versus decorative. Contour line is the line that goes around a character. It's as simple as that. And these, just like I said before, can be used for depth. It's not really using that right now. What's on Batman here? If you go dark, I mean, if you use contour line to kind of create depth, you would maybe make this one a little bit darker, a little bit heavier, right? A heavier, thicker line. Instead, they actually did put real shadow in behind the character, which is totally valid. Now, anything inside here is almost considered decorative. I wouldn't actually consider this to be too decorative, but one could say utilitarian line, right? We're trying to get a knee here. We're trying to create shadow, so there's communication there. Pointing to decorative line here, an example of this would be just within here would be that sort of shadow, right? Because it's not a realistic shadow. It's definitely a decorative shadow. So just as an example there, right? We kind of went over decorative already in the first slide with the fox and the images to the right and left. This is certainly much different than that. It's more utilitarian, but it is technically decorative because it's not emulating something realistic, but it is giving us more depth, and it's a useful tool, to mess around with while you're creating. A tool for depth. And it does, if it's decorative enough, it'll give that modern, cartoony feel, right? Normally shadows kind of fade out, etc. Those don't. Just like with these shadows on the Frank Miller Sin City character, which if you have not watched Sin City and if you have not read the comic books, you have to go do that. I mean, they are phenomenal. I may have brought this up already. I have no idea. Go watch the movies and also go get the books. Oh my God, it's amazing. Talk about noir, people. Talk about noir. Woo! Noir graphic style, so nice. The other thing is they use color in a very particular way. What do? They actually, it's all black and white, right? But then they have just a little pop of color. One character will be red, or one character will be yellow, etc. Like the Yellow Bastard is just a creepy villain. You have to, God, look up Yellow Bastard Sin City. You'll get some wild images. This guy's a nut. With that said, lines can vary in meaning, mood, or emotion. So here we have, a face. He's very geometric in regards to contour. Just beep, boop, boop. What does that tell us? It tells us that this guy has structure. This guy is stable to some extent. But then you go in here, structure, stable. I would argue unstable, actually, overall, but still straight, right? So he definitely has structure to some degree. Like, he has something that, like, definitely bold. But he has something going on that's like, okay, yeah, I got to get some job done, but I'm feeling strange. Right? Unstable. So he's got structure. He knows what he has to do. And he is definitely strong, right? Strong. But then you go inside and you got these little wavy wrinkles and tinkles, right? The eyes, heavy bags under the eyes. Forceful, bold. Not necessarily positive for him. He's definitely seen some life. This guy has aged early. Tenuous, uncertain, wavering. I would argue that some of those are also used here, right? Active? Oh, most certainly. You could even say that the unstable one I was commenting on is kind of active, right? And we'll get to these in a moment. I want to keep going over this, the main character's face here. Um, so think about how these lines, and you don't have to think too hard, please don't. I would say if the more you think about it, the more frustrating it will be to choose which line to use. So just kind of feel it, right? Don't worry about these charts. Know that this chart is here, and maybe change things after you're done, right? Don't be OCD about it. It's not completely universal by any means, and we'll get into that too when we get into color. Take a look at this chart, though. I mean, we have chaotic, right? We have meandering, casual, relaxing, dynamic, rough, rasping, grating, flamboyant, etc. These are all things we should pay attention to. So, speaking of color and subjectivity, color theory is a deep, deep subject. Choice of color palette can affect mood or tone of a game and help define a style. I mean, look at Journey. Look at Guacamelee. Look at Katamari Damacy. I don't think I pronounced that right at all. This thing is kind of childlike, right? And they wanted it to be playful. This is kind of half and half. A little bit wild in regards to its, a little bit haunting as far as by using a sort of desaturated, slightly desaturated, but then keeping things popped like the actual villain here, meaning brighter colors, desaturated, brighter. So bright colors on desaturated. And then very sort of ethereal, right? Ethereal and otherworldly, but still maintaining some contact with our own sort of what we would recognize as landscape here on Earth. Basic vocabulary of the Munsell color system. Not too shabby here, not too hard to get into. So saturation, obviously, things becoming more rich, more vibrant to some extent. One could say vibrant. I would say more chromatic, right? So chromatic meaning richness of the color. Value is light to dark, simple as that. Hues are always going to be in the middle. They're just the actual foundational color, the primary unit of measurement, right in the center of the value, but also right on the edge of the richest of saturation. Monochrome, always useful, limits the palette to just one hue of differing values. So you can't really go wrong there. And Limbo did a great job with this as far as just looking into, okay, well, what if we don't have color? And I want it to, it almost has to have no color because we need this sort of noir theme, right? Limbo does that. Unfinished Swan, almost monochrome, not completely, but it does limit the color palette, and thereby allowing the players to focus more on the mechanics, right? The interactivity. So you're definitely going to get some kind of alien-like world out of it. This isn't too alien, though. This one, I would argue this is actually not alien at all. More just an interactive landscape that's really cool. Play that video on your own. I'll just kind of do like 10 or 15 seconds of it. But if you do want to look at these games, Giant Sparrow is a fantastic company. Look into all that they've done. What Remains of Edith Finch, right? So very, very good stuff. Also Journey, right? They helped with Journey. They created Journey. I would argue they actually may have reused assets as well, which is definitely that's good practice. Actually, it's not a bad thing. Anyways, take a peek at that, and here we are at Journey. Look at that. Look at that. So nice. They're using color to allow you to focus more on the not only the story, but also that interactivity. And this is a sort of iconic part of the whole journey, right? You're trying to get to that. You're trying to follow that. But what does this do? The most important part about monochrome that I could kind of get after and define here for you is that it is just going to give you that mood. I mean, it is like, okay, I don't know how to get the mood going here. Well, let's just pick, I want this scene to be happier, all right? Make it a little bit more red, maybe just a little warmer, right? I want this scene to be dark and kind of mysterious, but also, kind of lacking emotion, right? Just like, we got to get through this, and perhaps actually an extreme emotion, like a dire emotion. That could be the alternative. Maybe depressed, right? You would go cooler if you were depressed or something like that. So think about what red means to you. I'm gonna keep that. I'm just gonna blow past this, but think about what it means to you. All right. Because everybody has a different meaning for color. Every culture, every tribe, every society, they all think of color in a different way. And each person individually thinks of it differently. Overall, though, I will say this, for red, and maybe for other colors as well, with the exception of some very, very outsider sort of belief in the color, which is rare, is that red is energetic no matter what. It is, universally speaking, it is a fairly energetic color. That part, I think, is actually kind of universal, and we could make arguments for that, right? And we could debate that. In China, red symbolizes good fortune, joy. You cannot go to a funeral wearing red. That is forbidden, right? Depending on how strict they are religiously or what have you, culturally, I should say. But it's a traditional symbolic color of happiness. Many people will think of love or fiery spirit or violence even, right? As well. All of this is energetic. They all fall under the category of energetic. And that's the one way that we can say there is something universal about color. Moving on to desaturated color palette, this is just going to kind of give you that vibe of post-apocalyptic, sort of dystopic. Definitely a fantastic way to kind of get straight to that theme. Greece is a game I'd like you to actually peruse this as well, that video. Saturated color, definitely one of my least favorites, but I think if you use it correctly, it can be quite powerful. One game in particular, one series or one entire enterprise, conglomerate, maybe not enterprise, but brand, I should say, is Mario, right? Mario is very, very playful. The dude is the definition of play, fitted with a lovely Italian accent. Definitely kind of northern Italian, or maybe middle Italy, right? Forgot his exact origins. I would love to look that up sometime. But yeah, childhood and simplicity, right? But then we move on to realistic color palette. We're getting a little bit more focused on the world itself, but also the story. Let's really define the story. How can we really, really define this story, make this story come alive, but also really get our players to feel like they're in that story? Well, choose some realistic colors. It doesn't have to actually look realistic, by the way, but have them relate to the game as if it's nature, right? Have them feel like they belong. And that's realistic colors are going to give them that sort of spatial, temporal, simulated feeling where they feel like they are in that character's space and time, right? And that's really important. It's really powerful to when it comes to engagement for your players. An example of something that may have been created prior with brighter colors, right? And they said, well, we really want to make, I'm just using this as an example. We really want to make our game actually a little bit more adult, a little bit less childlike, but we still want to keep the fun look. So they kept the characters the same, but then they just changed the color palette, made it a little bit more painterly, while also incorporating a very earthy color palette, a very more realistic color palette. Braid. Color choices can make or break a character design. Yes, this is true. There is significance in these color choices. Batman is sad. He's a sad boy. He just doesn't know what to do sometimes, you know? He's got to go take care of the business. He's got to go fight the villains. But he wants to be somebody that's just feared in general. So he made his whole outfit to embody that, right? These sharp lines, right? The dark colors. But also, he's just depressed in general, right? And it really, the uniform he wears is literally defining what he's kind of like as a character. Whereas Clark Kent here, Mr. Superman, he is bright and fairly joyous all the time. The guy is not really depressed at all, which, you know, I don't know what kind of endorphins he's got going on, but this guy has positivity, all right? Whereas Batman's a little bit more pessimistic, but also he's hopeful, right? Which is good. He is very depressed, but he's hopeful. But the colors themselves, I mean, this just proves, right, that these colors make a character more playful. These colors make them a little bit less playful. Simple as that. You don't want to mess with Batman, because he can take on Superman. He's going to get beat up, and he's going to get destroyed. But he can take him on, right? He's got some wits in there. Value related to color is the range of lightness and darkness within a subject, regardless of color. But yeah, suffice it to say, the human eye instinctively looks for boundaries between areas of contrast. I mean, that is just what happens. How else do we define space when we're walking around, right? Like, imagine if we couldn't define boundaries between areas of contrast. And I do feel bad for people who have certain vision issues, right? Be thankful for your eyes. Seriously, it's a gift. And the human eye, it's very special. I mean, you have different focal points that literally through light itself gives you an object. Right? The light is actually giving you an object to look at, to interact with. It's not just like, oh, well, the object is the object, right? Well, the light, if the light wasn't there, the object wouldn't really exist to you. If there was absolutely no light, perhaps you could feel the object, right? But we don't have any differentiation of, you know, or expression of space without light. The way a surface feels or is perceived to feel based on how light is reflected off a surface can give a sense of realism. And look at that. Wasn't that interesting? I was talking about feeling your way through the darkness, and here we are at texture. It's like I planned it or something, you know? Oh, wow, that's crazy. Look at this guy. SpongeBob, Ren and Stimpy. Oh my gosh, this is slipping my mind. This is like the beasts of the wild or something, is that right? Texture can be added to attract, positive, or repel, negative. It can add interest to an element, and I am definitely interested in that. One of the, and I want you to pay attention to this, one of the fascinating things about SpongeBob and as well as Ren and Stimpy, although Ren and Stimpy is a bit, you know, can be a little bit they can be a little bit inappropriate, like politically not correct a lot. But it just comes with the times, right? Anyhow, so one thing I want you to pay attention to is that they're also forming a relationship between smooth texture, right? Smooth, but then giving something rough right on top of it. Just every now and then something, every now and again, just something a little bit rough is introduced into your vision. With SpongeBob, actually, I just watched a bunch last night. Actually, you'll go through, you'll be watching the episodes, right? And you can actually go onto the Nickelodeon app on Roku and I think you have like ads to go through, but whatever. I mean, it's worth it. Just watch some episodes. The beauty of SpongeBob, Ren and Stimpy, etc., is that they literally kind of, right when you're kind of getting bored with the visuals, they'll give you that, right? They'll give you that SpongeBob, or they'll give you that Ren and Stimpy, right? Where there's very high detail. All of a sudden, you're in a sort of realistic painting of the character that you were just seeing, and it relates to the story. That relationship to the story, in addition to more of a realistic style, graphic style, what that does is it actually brings you closer to the character, and therefore enhances the overall story. You cannot beat that, right? And you can do this in your games. It's sort of a simple trick, but you can do it. It's really, really powerful. Don't underestimate that. And I'm not expecting you all to do this, of course, right? But if you can, that is very, very powerful, and that's part of the reason why these brands were so successful. But also great story writing, great narrative. Yeah, Popeye. Love some old Popeye episodes. Haven't watched them in a while. Again, they're old, right? So there's some not so politically correct things in them. But if you can just get past that and just look at how things are animated, I mean, talk about squish and stretch, people. Stretch and squash, squishity squash, stretch, stretchity squish. Amazing. But the realistic Popeye, whew, man, that's scary. I'd still want to hang out with him, though, just to see what he's like. He seems like a nice guy. He's just a little rough around the edges, right? Eat some spinach, everybody. It's good for you. Texture, texture, texture. Apologies for the terrible Photoshop elements here. This is not how I would usually do it. Let's just put it that way. Regardless, though, yeah. They would call this going a little bit too far with the uncanny valley. I mean, imagine if you ran into this guy on the street, right? Honestly, there might even be somebody that sort of kind of was just born to look like that. Who knows, right? You just don't know. There's so many strange anomalies out there. Playful, not playful. Little or no texture can stylize or give you a sort of cartoony feel, right? Obviously. Shape in itself, two-dimensional area that stands out from the space next to or around it due to a defined or implied boundary. Limbo definitely does this, but also gives you the sort of perception of 3D. You perceive it as 3D in many instances. It's just how they use the shapes in the space and where they place them. Mechanical shapes are going to give your players a different feel, right? A more structured feel, a more complex feel. They can produce a feeling of control or order. Organic shapes, a little bit more chaotic in regards to feeling, much like the chaotic line that we talked about. Yes, they are complex and normally found in nature, and they can produce a feeling of freedom as well as chaos. But yeah, take a gander at these shapes, Lovely. Look at that. Look at all those shapes. Nice shapes. We also use shape to create silhouettes of our sort of concept art, right? This isn't required of you to do. If you do see that in the rubric, I thought I took that out. But if you do see it, just ignore it. Just do what it says in the actual rubric, not at the assignment place, because I think that's where that would be. But regardless, I have gotten rid of that. Anyways, silhouettes help you sort of see, how is this character gonna feel? Like, what is this character? How is it gonna present itself in space? Like, is it going to fill space in this way? Is it gonna fill space in that way? Allows you to really pay attention to the positive space, but also the negative space, the space around the character, and just see what kind of feeling you get. So if we look at these, obviously, you could kind of define what these characters might do. If we got rid of that, we could say, okay, this guy's all about structure, right? Because of how structured his stance is. It's very rigid. This guy, perhaps, I don't know. I'm trying not to think about these up here. Perhaps he's, because of this line being a little bit more fluent and there's less geometry, like in the sort of engineer or mechanic here. Perhaps he's a little bit more chaotic, right? Likewise here. This guy just looks like a businessman, so maybe he's kind of a spy, right? This guy looks sort of like a scout, or like maybe a medical person, I don't know. But, just these little, the way things are contoured really can help define the sort of feel of your character. So look into silhouettes, it's definitely helpful. And they could be white or black. Could even be red or green if you want. But the industry likes white or black. Unfinished swan. If we gray out everything, we can really see the form, right? So here, they're using form to just, in a very primitive sense, but also in slightly organic sense. It also kind of gives rise to certain mechanics, right? The drawn, unfinished stuff. These pots, for example. And usually in unfinished swan, what's interesting is you'll get a little bit more organic in regards to the unfinished things. So it's a nice contrast between structure and non-structure. When dealing with form, we also have to be cognizant of light. Bad is, head-on light, right? Better is light that's kind of 3/4. Maybe it's sitting from the side a little bit, right? And that light gives us more on form. It informs the form, right? Light informs the form. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty much flat, even though there's a light on it, right? These are very flat. It's very deadpan, very dead center light. You don't want that. You want to kind of go from the side with your lighting. Because we're working with 2D, lighting is a little bit limited, right? Not completely limited, but do what you wish with that. Perhaps don't even worry about lighting. It's not exactly, and that's something we can talk about later. Proportion. This will do a lot for you. Depending on how you approach this, typically human proportions range from what would normally be 7.5 to some, let's say if you're making a sort of protagonist like Superman, Superman's head is normally very small in conjunction or in comparison to his body, right? Therefore, heroic. He's a heroic character. Likewise with Batman or many of the illustrated protagonists. They'll use 9 heads versus the 7.5, which is normal. And I'd say that ranges between 7 and 7.5. I've done a lot of figure drawing. I have thousands and thousands of figure drawings, live figure drawings, right? From art school and before and after. Great little chart here. Keep that for yourself. Just right click and save that image. I think that's helpful. If you want to get crazy, use it. Man, how do you pronounce that again? Chibi style. Very, very childlike, very baby-like, actually. It's a cute character. There are many, many character archetypes from Japan to America to China. They all deal with childlike characters in their own unique way. Cute characters are definitely something to pay attention to if you need it. If you need to, I mean, like Paper Mario or Super Mario Brothers, the original, right? Any Super Mario, really. They use this style to some extent. Not exactly chibi, but Super D style, super deformed. I believe that's kind of like a super deformed Naruto or somebody. Very similar to chibi style. Now, when we get into video games and we start looking at how we can use these proportions, how we can use the shapes, how can we use the color and the line, you know, what's out there? Zelda. Chibi style is used in games like this. And as technology improved, large detailed sprites and then 3D characters became possible. But yeah, Zelda, definitely chibi style. Definitely chibi style here. For some reason the name is escaping me, which is insane. Final Fantasy, there you go. Fairy-on sprites. Fairy-on original design. So there are some differences, right? But you have, so this would be more heroic, almost bordering on fashion, actually. This would be more chibi, more sort of cutesy character. Different proportions for the chibi style itself. So even so, games like Final Fantasy IX, Square Enix 2000 adopted the technique as a style, and yes, it was helpful for them. And they did such a beautiful job with it. Keep this in mind while you're working on Project 01B. Many video games today, particularly in the indie scene, they're going to use this style. Why do they use that style? Because it's easy to manipulate, it's fun, it relates to, you know, whatever, it could relate to any theme, really. It doesn't have to be happy, it could be a sad thing. But most of the time it's fairly happy. So I didn't get around to totally finalizing this section of the slideshow, but I just wanted to briefly go through these. So there are many, many books on how to draw cartoons. You know, like I said before, you don't have to be an expert drafts person, somebody who draws well to take this course, right? Cartoon proportions, you know, yes, they can be done with stick figures. It's okay. Your whole game can be stick figures, as long as I see the effort, that's good. Anyways, archetypes for these cute characters come in many forms. So you have the heavy, pugnacious character, cop, construction worker, mob, right? Mafia. Sort of maybe somebody who's just like a wise guy, or a literal bear or gorilla. Goofy characters, they're definitely going to be kind of like slumped and, you know, kind of slender and, you know, maybe they're having a problem standing up. Basic formula. I believe these are taken straight from Eisner, or what's that other book? From the book I recommended in the beginning of class, the class of week 1. Titles, I'll tell you, titles just slip my mind. The screwball type. Normally kind of a big head, not too crazy, but also like a small body. Like you know, it's pretty interesting. So, you know, like Alvin and the Chipmunks, for example, definitely a screwball type. I like all of them, and very well done. Alvin and the Chipmunks, very well done. Great brand, great series, great work there. Early cartoon archetypes. So Shape describes the character's personality in many senses. And I'm sorry, but stereotypes are real. they're there for a reason. It's not healthy to go out and stereotype people. It's not healthy. It's especially not healthy to judge people because we don't know what the heck happened to them, 5 years ago. Maybe something tragic happened and it turned them into a mean person, right? Be nice to each other. But I will say, and I think you can agree, stereotypes are real. I'm sorry. When I worked in construction, I'm so glad I didn't. I mean, some construction people are awesome. They have such a beautiful heart and all that. But man, they are definitely, you can see a construction guy from a mile away, right? And I almost became that. I'm glad I got out early. I'm sorry. I loved it, but I'm glad I got out early. I was gaining too much weight, eating too many donut things, and drinking too much coffee, and I was all rough and gruff and this and that. It's pretty funny. It's just like you just become what you do, right? But do make sure you exercise. By the way, I don't think students exercise enough nowadays. I know that I have to exercise personally a little bit more. Because our stereotype as creators and developers is that we're typically not the strongest of humans. Some of us might be extremely nerdy. Some of us might be a little nerdy, or just nerdy enough, right? And we tend to get passionate about ideas, passionate about the way things are designed, etc. And I'd say we kind of end up in this range. Like we're like screwball / goofy, right? And perhaps, oh wait, no, this is screwball and that's, yeah. Anyway, so used irony to help define characters, the Looney Tunes, and I'd say they did a great job. I mean, look at this. Yeah, those are definitely mob guys, right? And then the screwball mob guy still has the wide shoulders, but just like a giant hat. Oh my god, the character's great. Yeah. Sometimes when you have a character contrasting their personality with the shape of their body, that says a lot. And that can go a long way in story. It can go a long way in visuals. Let juxtaposition of very kind-hearted but like a gigantic body, let that speak for itself. It's really like, look at this big baby, right? It really helps to kind of define a certain feeling within your audience. Like, oh, he's a big bear and he's a little bit clumsy. Oh, he's kind of cute though, even though he's big, right? So you can really play around with that. Tweety Bird contrasting with, because she's so heroic, she's so good at getting away, right? Really, really intelligent. But you wouldn't really notice that right away by looking at the animations. She's kind of a screwball, I'd say so, but a very smart one. Straight man, coward, tough guy. So again, contrasts, right? Small. What does that even mean, straight man? What does that mean? Interesting. Coward. I wouldn't actually. I think what we want to say here is like lazy. not straight man. I don't know how that got there. Apologies for that. I didn't actually make these slides, right? Like these ones here are being updated by me, but I never got around to these ones, so I apologize for that. How is shape used in modern cartoons? Well, in modern or contemporary cartoons, or even like cartoons from 2000, we have, or even the 80s or 90s, right here, Beavis and Butthead, we have a lot to kind of peruse through. So what makes Godzilla and Barney so different? They're both stylized T-Rexes with dudes inside. Godzilla, obviously the grimacing one, right? Barney, the happy-go-lucky one. And think about shape. Round and curvy, angular and or pointy. I did edit these ones, by the way. I mean, nobody else is using Barney in their lectures. Come on now. It's only me. It's only me. Think about proportions. Make connections between this, right? So Barney, he must be a nice guy. He only has 3 heads that make up the height of his body. Godzilla, this guy is kind of menacing. Small head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, not that small of a head, to be quite honest. But still, it helps to make him feel like more of a threat, right? A little bit closer to where we are at 7, 7.5. Brings Godzilla into our sort of realm of existence because of the heads, and also because of the more realistic color that's used. But all in all, definitely more desaturated, right? Barney is just straight up saturation. If they had a love child, oh baby, watch out, Barnzilla, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody there. Whoa, Barnzilla. So consider all of these moving forward. These concepts combine and interact to help establish style and tone. You need to think of them as you work. O1B, do soon. Make sure that you're thinking about this stuff while you are creating. Even with the most common theme, the design choices you make and how you use these concepts can have an enormous effect on the player experience. So let's get wild. Make it cohesive, baby. Make it cohesive. Make it cohesive. A lot of colors can be repeated. A lot of patterns can be repeated. A lot of design can be repeated, excuse me. Try to use every color and shape more than once so that you can give uniformity to your work. The consistency is what establishes a cohesive style. And that's that, ladies, gentlemen, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching my ridiculous slideshow. Look at that, we went through 90 slides. You did that with me. Thank you so much for watching and for helping me get through it. Hopefully that was helpful, just to kind of give you a synopsis of where I think you should be at in regards to using elements of visual style. Very important thing to have in your tool belt, knowing how to use those things. Please have a lovely, lovely weekend, if it is close to the weekend for you, and the rest of your night. We shall talk soon. O1B is due, and your propaganda gift should already be in, theoretically, unless due dates have been changed. Have a great evening.